What are some of the machiavillian ways that narcissists and some cluster B personality types tend to idealize, discard, and devalue? A lot of us probably have some experience with that. First off, we're going to talk about the Svengali methods that narcissists tend to idealize. Seduction, charm, neuro-linguistic programming are just some of the Svengali methods that narcissists and some cluster personality types use to idealize us. These tend to be very subtle. In other words, they're not very clear until it's too late, or when the relationship has gone on for a little while. So when we start to critically think about how they seduce and how they charm, that's pretty easy to point out. But a lot of the times when we're all in our emotions and sometimes in our egos, it's hard to even see how they seduce and charm you, which is another way of idealizing you or putting you up on a pedestal. But when we really think about it, who really wants to be with someone who puts them on a pedestal? That means you cannot be human. That means you can't make mistakes. So this means men and women really can't be who they really are in relationships with some cluster B personality types and narcissists. So let's move right on into the neuro-linguistic programming, which actually can be used to help you. Most narcissists and some cluster B personality types, they use NLP to get the narcissist supply. This is how they hook you. This is how they also use the charm and seduction, but when they start playing mind games, this is where the NLP or the neuro-linguistic programming really kicks off. So there are three things that neuro-linguistic programming tends to do when a narcissist or a cluster B personality type uses idealization. Number one, it robs you of your voice. Number two, it mystifies your identity. Number three, it stagnates your life. So when a narcissist idealizes you, that means they're not really seeing you for who you are. They tend to put you up on a pedestal until you fall from grace. Remember, narcissists and cluster B personality types tend to have a black and white mentality. So as soon as you show that you are a human being or you make a mistake, this is when you fall from grace. And they tend to discard you, or actually they devalue you first, then they discard. But I think you all can get the picture here. When a person idealizes you, it really doesn't give you enough elbow room to be a human being, to be a man, to be a woman who's going to make mistakes, who may from time to time make poor choices, but you're still lovable. But don't tell a narcissist or cluster B personality type this. Now, some cluster B personality types, such as borderline personalities, those who have an antisocial personality, some of those who have a narcissistic personality, as well as a histrionic personality, what tends to happen unless they're getting some sort of support to help them with their personality disorder, they tend to have a black and white mentality. When a narcissist and cluster B personality type idealizes and they put you up on a pedestal, this means that at that moment, you're not a threat. They're not perceiving you as a threat or a challenge at that time. Not unless or until you fall from grace. Then they tend to move right on to devaluating you. The ultimate silent treatment is covert narcissism, because you're being secretly mistreated and you're also emotionally being blackmailed to keep their secret. Covert narcissism, I've heard it said, can be one of the worst types of pathological narcissism there tends to be, which I can kind of see that. And from personal experience, I can tell you, when you suffer in silence, it's a very vicious cycle, because you want to tell, but at the same time, the person who is mistreating you, you don't want to harm them, you don't want to hurt them, but they're bringing you harm. It's a very vicious cycle. Covert narcissism can be a very vicious cycle in and of itself. You know, a lot of narcissists and some cluster B personality types, they like to keep that vicious cycle of narcissistic abuse going, which is idealization, devaluation, and discard. But within all of that, there's another wheel that's turning, and that is covert narcissism. Because when you are suffering in silence, that's a clear indication, well, really to you, from people who are on the outside looking in, it may not be as apparent, But it begins to become apparent to you that you're suffering in silence because you are emotionally being blackmailed to keep the covert narcissist dark and dirty secret that they are mistreating you. This is a very sneaky and cunning and serpentine way to devalue you. Another way they do this is they use your unresolved pain against you. All right, so again, this is a very sneaky and underhanded way to actually devalue you. They sabotage you. Okay, some narcissists, believe it or not, some narcissists and some cluster B personality types, they tend to be addicted, if not obsessed, with sabotage. Okay, they are addicted to painful emotions. They like to inflict the painful emotions, and sometimes they will allow themselves to feel it because they are not able to emotionally regulate. So usually they don't allow themselves to feel the pain, but they will inflict it. This is where they get their satisfaction, watching you in pain, watching you suffer in silence. And all the while, they like to think they're going to get away with it. So when you keep their dark, dirty secret that you are being mistreated, again, we're going back to covert narcissism, which is a very vicious cycle. But when they do all of this, they tend to sabotage. They're just sabotaging. That means they're sabotaging your happiness. They like to think that they control that. Because remember, narcissists and cluster B personality types, they tend to like to control the relationship. They tend to like to get the narcissistic supply because they have false self-images that they like to keep fed. They have a reputation to uphold. Their false self-images can be anywhere from a martyr to a saint to a person who is a victim and can't catch a break in life. So when they sabotage you, okay, it kind of goes right into how they like to control the situation. They like to think that they're controlling how you feel. Some narcissists and some cluster B personality types, when you really think about it, they don't just affect, they infect other people. So when you're feeling like you feel, and when you may be thinking about all the shenanigans and all of the diabolical tactics that they pull, right? They're not really thinking about how you feel or how you think. They don't tend to think about how you're being affected by their behavior. They have a personality disorder. So they're not going to have those moments of clarity. And if they do, they tend to self-medicate. So the Machiavellian way that some cluster B personality types and narcissists will use to finally discard of a person, if this is a family situation, they will cut you out of the will. Sometimes they will emotionally blackmail people in order to get them to be legally bound to him or her, such as a marriage, children, a cohabitation situation, or a common in-law situation. So if you don't have a situation whereas you're emotionally bound to him or her, in other words, you may not have children, you may not be married to him or her, maybe you have gone no contact, and officially you are over this person. And this can also be a family situation where they can legally bound you to them. All right, I'll get to that in a minute. But if this is a romantic situation, they can legally bound, they can emotionally blackmail you in order to have you legally bound to him or her. This means that you're trapped. So the relationship, you know in your soul, the relationship is over. But you're legally bound to this person that you know don't love you. And you may not know, you may no longer be in love with him or her, but you're legally tied to each other. You're legally bound. So this is another way of discarding of you as they go out for new supply. And sometimes this can be very excruciating, spiritually, emotionally. They may scapegoat you. This also tends to be in narcissistic families. Someone is scapegoated. So when they're scapegoated, this alienates him or her. Okay, so if this is a family situation, say there's a family member who's been scapegoated by a cluster B personality type in the family. Say, okay, it may be a grandparent, it may be a parent. They choose one of the children to scapegoat. That child is alienated. Physically, they're still in the group, but they might as well not be. So that's another way to discard of a person, and they're still physically within the group. but they're going to feel that they've been outcast. They're going to feel probably, they're going to be feeling the alienation. They're going to be probably feeling lonely. They're a part of the group, but really they're not part of the group. So scapegoating tends to have a person feeling a certain way, maybe even thinking a certain way. I'm too different. I'm too weird. I'm not acceptable. This is just another Machiavellian way of screwing with somebody's head and their heart, especially if this is a family situation. Another Machiavellian way that narcissists and cluster personality types discard is that they will smear campaign or they will character assassinate. Again, this is another way of discarding a person, because that's like saying they're throwing them away, so they're ruining them or leaving them for damage so no one else will want them. Or they have that person, they influence that person to think and feel that they're undesirable, they're too different, they are not worthy of love. So it's very Machiavellian, it's very underhanded, and yes, it's a very diabolical way to discard of someone. Tool number 1, practice mindfulness. Regain your voice, your identity, regain your life. A lot of us, after we have experienced codependent narcissistic relationships, let's just face it, we need a very safe environment to express what we've gone through. We need to unload, okay? We need to vent. We need to be able to focus on thriving forward. And we need someone around us that's going to support us and cheer us on to do that. After a narcissist and cluster personality type idealize a person, devalues them, and finally discards them, sometimes even to try to hoover them back in, let's just face it, after we go through all of that, sometimes this is how some of us end up with layers of trauma. Simply put, CPTSD or complex post-traumatic stress. This is how we end up with these symptoms. Now, complex post-traumatic stress, it is not a diagnosis criterion in the DSM-5. So technically, one cannot be treated for this, but they can be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress or PTSD. When a person has all of these layers of trauma, right, they haven't processed it all. All of these layers need to be processed through. This is why it is imperative to have a support base after going through all of this. This is why in a lot of my videos, I really advocate having a support base. This way you can have the contrast. You can compare that narcissistic relationship to relationships that are healthy. Your support base is designed to provide you that contrast. 3 things a contrast does. It provides you harmony, it provides you balance, and it also provides you a peace of mind. Okay, so you need that in order to work through those layers of trauma. Some of us have this going all the way back to our childhoods. We've been dealing with cluster personality types. So when we have layers of trauma, this means that we're probably having symptoms or signs of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't like to say disorder, but complex post-traumatic stress, okay? And I want everyone to please research complex PTSD. Tool number 2, focus on your priorities. Find out what is it going to really take for you to continue to thrive forward past codependent narcissistic relationships. And it's going to take you a little time to concentrate on this and to figure it out. It's okay. You've been through an ordeal. So you're going to need to find out what is it going to take for you to continue to thrive forward. By using focused intention techniques, it can help you not only to make your goals come true, or actually it not only helps you to focus on your goal, but it helps you to focus on thriving forward. It helps you to clarify your intention. So focused intention techniques helps you to clarify not only your intentions, but your goals and your values, as well as your principles.